Hello, where are we? Yeah, plenty of ammo left in that. A video on the me sitting on the hill looking down on Base Camp 2. Yes, one of them. And I've got my guidebook for Base Camp 1 and my guidebook for Base Camp 2, and I'm comparing them. Bah. So what I wanted to develop what I was talking about, the inputs last time, that we call the five senses, and the sixth one, which was the internal to the brain generated senses. And I wanted to talk about it in a bit of a computer way, but so inverted I don't think people should get too confused that I'm talking about machines. So we've got these inputs. Sight is the perfect one to talk about, but I talked about them last time. We understand that some come in lightly on the body, like the sight and the sound and the smell, and taste is more direct, and pain is similarly direct, and then it goes up to the brain, and then inputs in either chemical or electrical form, and then something happens. And you can have internal generated things like fear and envy and things like that makes something happen. So the something that happens, I'd like to analogize to being like an icon on the desktop of your computer. Now, we're used to going to an icon on the desktop of the computer and pressing it, and behind the scenes all sorts of, I'll call it machine code. People understand, no, I shouldn't call it machine code, but I'll call it machine code. All sorts of machine code goes on, and something happens. But I'm going to do it the other way around. The light coming in, or the smell coming in, or the feeling coming in, and going up into the brain is the machine code going up to the brain and making the icon on the desktop in the brain light up. So I've kind of reversed it, and all these sensory inputs from the outside world and the inside world as well does the same thing. It makes for enough machine code to make an icon on the desktop light up. Yeah, okay, with that established, we can have representations, inappropriate representations. Mug. Whoa! It's still got some tea in it. Inappropriate. Now, safe mug. Mug. I believe the icon that's lighting up in the brain of mug, empty, is an appropriate icon that's been lit up. But it's a representation, obviously, in the brain that's lit up. The mug doesn't get shoved into the brain. A representation of the mug gets lit up in the brain. What I'd like to first point out, I think, is that it's never a misrepresentation. It can be appropriate or inappropriate for various contexts, but it's never a misrepresentation. Because I can't really do it for a mug. The Adam Curtis video that I watched a bit of last night, it felt like a kiss, his latest oeuvre. This girl got beat by her boyfriend, and the songs she sang about it was "The Blow Felt Like a Kiss." That icon on the desktop, kiss, was lit up by the machine code inputs of her being beaten by her boyfriend. Now, we can say that's an inappropriate representation, but it's not a misrepresentation. We can't say it's a misrepresentation because that is what happened. The next night when he beat her, she could be sick of it and think, you shit, and it didn't feel like a kiss at all, and it lit up a completely different icon. That is to show there's no... All representations are just representations. They're never, ever misrepresentations. They're only appropriate or inappropriate in various circumstances. I, you, 7 billion other people, mice, ants, and bacteria all have our own representations changing all through time. They're never the same, they're always different, and to say that's a misrepresentation and that's a correct misrepresentation, I think is a waste of time. We've got to go into the context of appropriate representation or misappropriate representation, dependent on the context. So let's go for some context. Let's go back to what I've sometimes talked about is my little flagellum fella. There's some machine code input coming in, sunlight, that hits it and makes it move. So the machine code sunlight comes in, lights up the icon, move you little bastard, and the little bastard moves. Flip, 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 flip. Appropriate or not appropriate will only be decided in the context for billions of years until we had neighbours with BMWs that we could be jealous about. The only context was really evolution and getting your DNA off into the future. It isn't that the creature knew it was doing it, or even that there was that game that existed. It's if you had to talk about a game, it's the only game you could possibly talk about because you can't think of another game when that's the only game for say a whole slodge of a billion years. What other game can you talk about? Nothing. The only game is that you develop into the future or you don't, and if you don't develop into the future, well, there's no game. So the only game is developing into the future, but it's no game at all. But anyway, appropriate for that context of development, of evolutionary, getting your DNA into the future, keeping the game going, and developing, so the game goes on. A creature like this would have been invented. Now, if the machine code came down and hit this creature, and it went like this, it would go like this until it ran out of energy and died. There was the balance of machine code to lighting up the icon was too critical. It was just when an icon lights up, we can generally accept that all it's doing is making the creature move, making the machine move, making the meat and potatoes move. Always has been, probably always will be. But if it makes it move too much, uses up too much energy, that's inappropriate for this context. So this one dies. But there would be a slightly different one built, because they're building them different all the time, where to light the icon up, let's say you then needed 4 lots of input of that sort of machine code. The one that made it go boogie like this and died wasn't appropriate for the game. So but one that was built that had 4, it needed 4 lots of this sort of input, and so then it just went and did the appropriate thing, survived. But what happens so often in nature, glorious Mother Nature, it just always goes through extremes. It's just always going off and going to extremes, like cancer and dinosaurs that are too big, and also it just does always go to extremes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but generally it doesn't. You've got to find a mean. But what I think happened is that the machine code inputs exploited, again talking about nature, it never knows what it's doing, but accidentally exploited a thing where it could loop out to sea, what I call looping out to sea. This made for 2 things, but consciousness, which I've discussed in the past, I'm not going to discuss here, I think that makes for consciousness, but every time it looped out, it made another impulse to make the correct impulse to fire the icon, which made the creature boogie. So the old amount of information being looped out to sea then hit this one, this one, this one, and this one in no time, and the creature was boogieing all over the place, and then died again. There's always a war going on within creatures. Mother Nature is war all over the place. Our bodies, what we call our bodies, are a complete battlefield. It's incredible what a battlefield they are. So an arms race will have developed between what it takes to make the icon flash you know, to light up, so the body boogies, and the information coming in. And this will have stacked up to 8, 9, 10. This one have been looping away like buggery, not knowing what it's doing, but all the time it was either appropriate for making it do just the right thing, or too much, or too little. When it got it right, the arms race balanced out for a while. And then this is billions of years of development which got to make for us. But all the time, the inputs, the machine code coming in, we're making for an icon lighting up and the body moving. And that's all we've got. That's what we are when we walk down into Base Camp 2. That's what we are. All this movement that you can see and hear and feel is all machine inputs, mainly sixth sense internal generated ones, making these movements, which you think are appropriate or not, that keep, you know, for me it doesn't, it's not as crucial to do the right thing now, but all the basics are exactly the same. It is just machine code inputs making icons go off to make the machine move and do things. And that's all that is happening in Base Camp 2. We then get hugely onto different contexts of appropriate representations. As I say, representations are always just representations. They're never wrong, because nobody can say they're wrong, because they change in the individual all the time. A second later, your representation might be different. My representation is different. Your different representations are different. 7 billion other representations are different. Rabbits, slugs, they're all different. We can't say the representations are wrong. We only deal in contexts. And context is a lot of what we deal in Base Camp 2, about whether these representations are appropriate for whatever context or not. I think I'll leave it there, because that's quite a lot of words, quite a lot of machine code for you to light up your icons or not. I will be planning to go on to talk about the contexts of input, the contexts of inputs, but I'll still be overlooking Base Camp 2. I'm not going to be going down into there, because we've got to decide somewhere along the line the relative importance of the five senses, light coming in, that sort of machine code, hearing coming in, that sort of machine code, smells coming in, that sort of machine code, taste coming in, that sort of machine code, feelings coming in, that sort of machine code, self-generated machine code, and discuss the various appropriatenesses for those in various contexts, which is where we experience in the human realm, which is Base Camp 2. Heavy dude stuff for 8 o'clock of a Sunday morning, huh? Yeah, see ya.